welcome back to our live stream from Kartmania. So we've spoken to Dan Holland, we've understood the race teams, but we now have Russell from Time Race Engines. So let's talk about engines. So I'm not going to talk about Hondas, fantastic bits of kit, but they are pull and go. We're talking about Rotax. So Russell, thank you so much for your time today. You know, I hope everyone's enjoying Kartmania, and we've all been very busy this weekend. Yeah. So I'm going to break it down into two engines. So we're going to talk about Inter first, and I assume that would include like Micromax as well, the same sort of things, aren't they?
Similar, yeah.
Similar. And then we go on to junior engines. So I want to ask you about rebuilds, when we should have those rebuilds done, and the difference between a top end and a bottom, and just basically so the parents out there can understand, you know, when you should do these things and make sense of your engines to go time back. So let's jump straight into the Inter class. So Rotax Inter, we done UKC in the Rotax Inter. Yeah. We were nowhere as quick as your time engines, probably because I didn't maintain it properly. Right. So how many hours an Inter engine should have before we consider anything on it? So what is a top end build? Because people say, oh, the top end, what is that? So
the top end is mainly just the piston, the top half of the engine basically is the top end build. So you've got the piston, the little end, and then just general maintenance on the top with the seals and things like that.
So do they wear?
They swell with different heat cycles. So if you get the engine too hot, then the top end seals will then expand and then can lose performance from that. And then the piston will wear over time basically.
And that's where you start losing your tenths of a second.
Yeah.
Okay, so how often should you have that top end? So let's go club racing. We're not talking about championships here, we're talking about club racing. So club level, grassroots, how often should we have that top end rebuild done?
So we would suggest in the club level, we think around about a 25-hour mark for a top end, and then for the micro probably more like 30, because it revs a lot less. You can go longer on the micro than anything else, so it's really bulletproof.
So 25 hours of just use?
Just general use. So the best way to basically calculate that is with like an engine timer, because as you use it, if you use it without a timer, it can really run away. You don't realise how many hours you do, basically, as you...
It's funny you say that, actually, because when we first started doing the championship side of things, I didn't actually put a timer on the engine, and I was trying to work out how many hours Zach's engine had done, and I couldn't work out that 25 hours, and before I knew it, our engine was losing a few tenths of a second, so I now bolt straight away a timer onto the engine. So that's a really important tip for parents, put a timer on. They're not expensive. There are Rotax timers out there, but also you can go on to Amazon, eBay, you can buy a standard engine rev timer. They're only like 10 quid. Depends what your budget is. So, okay, so 25 hours for a top end.
Yeah.
What's the bottom end?
So that's the bottom half of the engine, where you have the conrod, you've got the gears in the gearbox, and the crank obviously, and then there's some bearings and seals sort of in there as well. That in an Inter, you could we normally go like half the hours for a top end to a bottom, so you could probably go like 45 to 50 hours on the bottom end. Till you have a full rebuild basically. Okay, so you can run 40-50 hours before that bottom end gets done.
Yeah. When you do the bottom ends, do you have to redo the top ends, or is it, because you hear these things, you've got top, bottom, full rebuild?
Technically you don't, but we suggest that when you have the bottom end done, that you take a new piston at the same time, because the cost really is it's a lot less. Where the engine's already apart, you know, a lot of the labour costs and stuff is quite similar really. Like you've already paid it to have the bottom end apart and rebuilt.
So you must do both at the same time. So if you're using those timers, you can work out. So have your top end done every 25-hour mark, and then when it comes to that 45-50 again, which is half, just have it all refreshed again.
Have the whole thing done. It probably, if you were going to have a bottom end rebuild only to the full rebuild, it's probably only about £100 different, I would say.
Okay.
So it's like, I think the the normal cost for a full rebuild's 850 plus VAT. But if you were doing just the bottom, it would probably be, I think we don't really do it often, so I think it'd probably cost 750 plus VAT. Or just
so there's not a lot to do, you must get the whole thing.
Exactly, for the cost difference it's quite similar.
The top ends, how much is a rebuild top end?
A top end rebuild is 425 plus VAT.
425.
Yeah, that includes your labour, all your parts, a dyno running, and like performance sort of assessment.
And then so the full rebuild is that top end, the bottom end, around about the £1,000 roughly with
it's
plus
850
plus the VAT. Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, it's around that.
So that's Inter. We've just gone to Junior. So this conversation will be really useful for me.
Yeah.
So again, talking about club level, a Junior engine, top end, how many hours?
That's more like 15 hours for a top end on a junior and senior. It's the same. We suggest 15 hours, and then double for the bottom end, the full rebuild.
So 30 hours.
30 hours.
So you're looking at 15 hours top, 30 hours bottom again. Get them all done. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's club level. Pricing the same for junior and Inter?
Exactly the same.
No change?
No.
Okay. So let's go championship.
Yeah.
Obviously, I should imagine a lot less than that for rebuilds, or are they the same?
Fairly similar, I would say. But the one thing I would say in the championship level is you probably keep on top of your performance base more. So, okay, you might shave off a couple of hours, but it's more if the performance has dropped rather than anything else. So it's more like making sure you get your engine dynoed and check that it's at the highest level. And if it is off, then put a piston in after 10, 12 hours and your mini sort of 18, 20 hours, like rather than...
So the dyno is the key for championship, so keep checking the dyno to see
your performance on track. If you're questioning it because you've had a bad race or you're lacking on the straight lines at the race meetings, then get it checked out. Like before you waste 2 rounds of the championship, just get it checked. It's only like 80 to 100 quid to get a dyno test, and then at least you know where you're at, rather than sort of guessing, because there's a lot of variables.
Well, this, we've found this as well, and I'm sure your drivers see it. Zach's always saying he can't get out of corners. That's probably because I've gone over my hours, because I didn't have the hour timer on there. So what's the indications that some parents can't afford to go and get dynos done? I know the driver told me engine's slow, that engine's quicker than my engine. But what would the driver experience when they're thinking, actually, this is due a thing? Would it be like, Zach, you can't get out of the corners as fast?
I would say
that to go?
That's one of the first things, or if you're lacking in the second half of the straight, I would say. And obviously you've changed your sprockets to try to find that extra bit, but if it's not working, then get it checked out.
Okay, interesting. Now, another question, new barrel, old barrel. What does that mean?
So this last year, Rotax brought out a new barrel, basically a different manufacturer, because they're looking for more parity in the product, and they couldn't get enough barrels basically for the customer base. So they've changed their manufacturer. Next year in the Mini and Micro especially, it's mandatory to have this barrel. So whereas the Junior in the UK, you can use the old one still.
What's quickest? The new or old? Because there's so many things out there saying, have an old barrel, have a new barrel.
I would probably say the old barrel edges it, but as the batches come through, the gap's closing. So it's like there's not a lot. We had a couple of minis that we did this week, which were really strong performance compared to
on the new barrel.
Yeah, on the new barrel compared to like your normal old barrel sort of thing. Okay. So, and similar in Junior as well. We've had a couple recently which are really quite close in performance.
On the new.
Yeah.
Okay, so another word I want to say to you, squish. Squish. We're falling foul with a squish. For you out there, if you don't understand what squish is, you're about to find out. So my understanding of squish is the carbon build-up in the top end that basically reduces the size, I assume.
Yeah.
So that's how I understand it. You tell me, what is a squish?
So the squish is basically the gap between the head and the piston. So the head that you bolt onto the cylinder, between that and the piston, you put a little piece of 2mm solder or 3mm solder for Micromax, and you basically you turn it over, crush it, and then that measurement can't be below 1.2mm. So you're right that carbon, that basically affects the squish. So as that builds on the piston and on the head, that gap goes from being safe to obviously
illegal,
close or illegal. Yeah.
So why is that illegal? You know.
So the smaller the squish is, it's 9 times out of 10 it's faster, basically.
Right.
So if you could run it at, the legal limit's 1.2mm. If you could run it at 1mm, it would be quicker.
Okay, so that's going to make your engine. Is that quicker on the top or the bottom ends with that squish?
All over. Into everywhere, and in the micro. In them classes especially, it's everywhere.
So how often should you check a squish?
Us personally, we check it every week, but that's because we're doing high-level championship races, so it's important for us to not be over the legal limit. If you use, we suggest an oil called ENI oil, ENI.
Okay.
It is, and that's a fully synthetic oil, which then it doesn't build so much carbon up. So it keeps us at a good level consistently. Right,
that's an interesting tip. So as you know, when you use Rotax, you have to put the oil in. On our first engine, we was using caster. Within, I think it was 3 rounds of championship racing, our squish was out.
Yeah.
We didn't know. It was only because we took it in for a rebuild, they went, your squish is out, and we could have been disqualified. Yeah. So that's an important thing to check, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that oil is important.
So we used to use a caster-based oil, probably around 2 years ago now. We noticed we're checking it left, right and centre. Every week we're having to adjust it, which is no good for the customer. So we tested some different oils and found an oil basically that was level in performance, and then much better for maintenance.
And I've been told, whether this is true, when you get an engine rebuild, that you should run caster in it for the first few to build up that carbon. Is that wrong, or is that right?
We don't suggest that, to be honest. I think the performance is there from our rebuilds that we don't need to do that.
So be safe and use that oil.
Yeah, especially for the mini and micro. Okay. And then in the junior, it doesn't carbon as much at all because of the higher power.
So that does make sense. Well, that's really useful. Now I have one more for you, and I didn't warn you about this one. The legendary upside down carb that you see people trying to sell for a fortune on Facebook. What is that?
So it's called upside down 15. So basically, where the age of the carb is stamped on the side of the carburetor, and this one, for whatever reason, was stamped the other way up. And it's basically a myth, in my opinion, of that it's better.
Right.
For me, you can buy a brand new carb out the pack, and it's as quick as anything.
So advice is upside down carb, don't go and spend. I saw one on eBay for like 500-800 quid or something like the other day. Don't bother. Right, that's good. So that gives an idea about things. So as a dad, I can't break a seal on the Rotax.
Yeah.
So I've been on a race weekend or an owner's day. What should I do to my boy's Rotax engine before I put it away for a week or 2 weeks? What maintenance can I do to keep the engine in tip top?
So probably the most important is to take the carb off and empty the carb from fuel. That's probably the biggest thing. Then just generally cleaning around the clutch area, because that's where the dirt gets to most. And then very important in the winter is to drop the water from the radiator. So if you're using like straight water, make sure you remove it in case of freezing, because when it gets to around -4, -5, it will crack the cylinder. So really important in the winter.
So if you're storing your engine in a cold place, make sure you drop that water.
Or if you use antifreeze, you can use antifreeze in the radiator as well.
Okay.
Then you can just leave it.
So basically, carb off, drain the fuel out. What about taking the bottom of the carb and cleaning the jets out of the bottom? Should you do that?
Yeah, probably only need to do it if you're a leisure karting. You probably only need to do that, I don't know, every 3-4 months or so. They're quite good. They're quite robust. It's only if you leave fuel in that's when you get the block jets mostly. And if you use it in the wet as well, I suppose, is a little bit more. So you can remove the bottom of the carb and just remember where you've taken the jets from, basically.
Right, okay. And for those who haven't removed a bottom of a carb, that's where the floats are. When you do it, make sure you turn the carb upside down and those floats go back in and it rattles, so you know it works.
And there's a float height, so if you're doing any sort of cub racing, you'll need to make sure your float height's legal, basically. So any karting shop will sell, there's like a float height gauge, and then your height's got to just be within the
Now I've seen that on, I think it was Kart Republic on YouTube, where he was getting,
he showed it,
and he was like bending the float bits up, and and I've also noticed, I don't know if you're out there at home watching or watching it in the future, a lot more scrutineering is checking those float heights. We've been checked a number of times now.
One of the most common checks, I would say.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Russell. I've learned a lot. I hope you've learned a lot out there. Really interesting to know, especially around self-maintenance and how much these things cost. So, top tip, put a timer on your engine, check your squish. If you do want time to do your engine, doesn't matter where your engine's come from, time will take it, you will look at it, you will do your best with it, and look after it for you. So I hope that's really helped you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
We'll be going, we've got 2 more lives to do if you're watching this. Kill that stream. Thank you for watching.